Hello, everyone, and welcome to Point of Purchase by geekspeak Commerce. On this show, we live stream conversations with fellow experts within the ecom ecosystem to talk about all things retail, technology, business strategy, and more. My name is Trisha Williams. I'm your host for today's show, but I'm also the managing partner and client success leader here at geekspeak Commerce. Now, our agency focuses solely on helping our clients, whether they're brands, distributors, or retailers, to sell more online. We've got a great episode lined up for you today. As mentioned, we are live, so you're welcome to ask any questions you might have by entering them in the comments field on LinkedIn or YouTube. And we'll try our best to get to as many as possible near the end of the show. And feel free to drop us a line, say hello, let us know where you're tuning in from. So today's episode is all about elevating the e-commerce channel by leveraging expertise along with digital shelf analytics to grow CPG e-commerce sales. And joining me today is David Beniolio, CEO of Upshelf. David, welcome to Point of Purchase.
So happy to be here, Trisha. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. Feel lucky to have you. So let's get your backstory in. Tell us about yourself and tell us about Upshelf.
Great. So Upshelf is an e-commerce analytics platform, delivers real-time product monitoring for brand SKUs across their partner sites and locations. So essentially, we use AI to generate KPIs and real-time insights like stock vulnerabilities, competitive pricing, positioning, content accuracy, and so on. We've been in business for 4+ years. We're based out of Toronto and Barcelona. Whenever I say Barcelona, people get kind of jealous, but I don't spend nearly enough time there. I'm sitting here in Toronto. And as for me, I've been working and leading tech startups for nearly 30 years. And of course, as you know, being in tech, the goal of technology is generally to make complex things easier to do. And in this e-commerce area, there's a lot of complexity, a lot of data. And the industry is really screaming for simplicity. So there's lots of work to be done here. And I'm really having fun with it.
Yeah, you bet. Well, the industry is definitely screaming for tools like Upshelf, for sure. And I, too, am lobbying for that trip to Spain. So I've told you that a few times at this point. So
you're on.
Hopefully we can make that happen.
You're on.
So this episode is going to be a little bit different. We're going to be, having more of a conversation, sort of going back and forth. And so let's jump in. At GeekSpeak, as an agency, we create content for thousands of items every year across a range of brands and categories, not just CPG. So it's good to get some tech support for sure in terms of auditing, monitoring, and identifying gaps and opportunities for brands that we work with. But before we get into the details of how Upshelf works itself, let's set the stage a bit, right? And talk about what's happening in e-com, specifically in the CPG space, and specifically in Canada. We don't often get that Canadian conversation going, right?
Right.
So I'm going to mention COVID-19 only because I've heard some brands, that internally it's still a part of the conversation. Basically, the argument is that since stores have fully reopened, e-commerce is no longer as big a focus, requiring investment, right? But I think we can all agree that we're fundamentally changed, right? And during COVID-19, the growth rate for e-com definitely accelerated, especially in grocery, right? A category that previously was super slow in adapting, especially here in Canada. But since then, the investment in the channel has been huge. I'm sure you've seen this as well with, major players like Walmart, LCL, Voila by Sobeys, and of course, Amazon. They're all leading the way, right?
Of course.
And as I said, I think we're all fundamentally changed. I order online. I might be a bit of a super user, admittedly, but I think generally the public has changed, right? But at the root of all of this is convenience and choice, right? But let's take a look at some of the numbers. It's not just my opinion. So let's look at online sales versus brick and mortar sales. So online grocery sales are projected to grow by 12.4% this year compared to 3.4% in store. And in 2025, we're looking at 11.6% growth year over year versus 3% in store. And online sales will continue to outpace brick and mortar sales through to 2027. I mean, admittedly, the lion's share of sales is still happening in store right now, but the growth rate is far greater online, right? The interesting piece here too is that there's been this rise of the omni shopper, um, who's really transforming retail, making shopping more of a fluid experience than a binary one, where you're either exclusively ordering online or exclusively shopping in store. More and more consumers are doing a bit of both, right? And ultimately, it just comes down to, again, convenience. What's going on in any given day, any given week? Your choices are going to change here to there. But David, what are your thoughts on the state of e-com in Canada and what's going on as far as omni-channel trends?
Oh yeah, great. No, those are some great insights, Trish. And what's interesting about COVID, when you think about all of those, you touched on a few really interesting points. That COVID was in grocery specifically, it's one of those areas that just stuck. It just made the most sense because COVID had this way of making us as humans sort of reevaluate the way we do a lot of things. And I think people came out of it saying, well, from all the things, I think I wouldn't mind going back to the store to see how my, get shoes, or I don't need to order all this food to my home all the time. I like to go out, but walking up and down aisles for 45 minutes, that never really made sense, right?
Yep.
And it's actually one of these things that it's stuck. And McKinsey's study that I was looking at recently showed that grocery is poised to be the biggest category, right? Over 20% of overall e-commerce, more than electronics and apparel, your traditional big ones. Grocery is going to be the biggest. I love your point about omni-channel too, because you tend to think that, okay, brick and mortar is still biggest, much more important, but the omni-channel experience, specifically with Gen Z and millennial, is, I think the number was around 86% of those shoppers will do both, some combination of both.
Mm-hmm.
So it's happening back and forth. I believe I had a slide here which had a few stats on my end. Some of the things that I'm seeing really interesting is and we're hearing over and over again, is the notion of brand loyalty, and it's waning, especially amongst younger shoppers. And e-commerce is a real contributor of that. It's so easy. You mentioned convenience. It's so easy to look at a screen and see something that is promoted to you in a way that you may also like, or that is cheaper, or if something is out of stock, to just simply click on a different product. And I think that creates a big challenge for brands that have sort of dominated categories for a long time, where people had to go to the store, they knew they shopped from a flyer and they knew it was there. So I think brand loyalty is an issue, and the complexity is another scenario that we hear time and again, where the stat again, I believe it was again, was it a Forbes study, was around the number of banners that a typical shopper will visit in a week.
Mm-hmm.
Back in our time, and even my own experience in shopping, we had a flyer. You went to that one main brick and mortar location and you did your shopping. And this week you're talking about 5+ marketplaces that people are shopping through. So, you may be getting your, certain items through Instacart from Costco, and then you have Fortinos or Loblaws doing your basic dry goods and all the items that you're picking up, and then you're physically going to a local place for your produce, and you're going to Amazon for some other items. That's really a different environment. So for a brand, you need to be there, right? You need to be present, and you have to understand all those different dynamics.
Yep.
Of course, the technology element is interesting. People talk to us about, too many SaaS platforms, or how to sort of consolidate the platforms, but also getting the right people in place. Becoming technology shops or finding people is hard. And I think the stat here is that somewhere around 8% increase in year-over-year technology investment. So investing in technology, getting the right people technologically that can help with this is another focus point. And my last point here is around know-how, and brands themselves are very good with their product. They're ultimately manufacturers of unbelievable product, and they innovate. But traditionally have relied on a retailer to market their goods. So you had your trade deals, your sales organization went in place, put some great deals in place to make sure you're you're there, you had your logistics playbook, everything kind of worked at the brick and mortar level. But now when you're on 5 or 6 different marketplaces across 5,000 stores, say in Canada, if you're a national player, then you now have to go and market your own products and compete. So you're dealing with ad platforms, you need digital marketers, all kinds of content specialists, and ad buyers and things like that. They just don't have that know-how. So I guess, that kind of back to you, Trisha, with all that work. How are you seeing brands dealing with this?
That's a perfect setup for us, because obviously we're in this space. We've been in this space for a very long time, and it's something that we talk to prospects and clients about all the time. It really depends on where brands are in their e-com journey, right? And there are a few key components included in any e-commerce strategy, we think. First off, just like you called out, I would start off with people and technology. And I like to pair people and tech, because I believe you can't effectively implement the use of software tools without an internal champion or external support system, right? Otherwise, you can end up with some pretty costly licenses to software that either don't get used or they're underutilized, right? So on the other hand, to successfully onboard and enrich products requires a dedicated team, whether it's internal, external, or a mix of both. And I would say a mix is probably ideal. And it calls for a ton of collaboration. And I'm going to rhyme off some roles here, just so that people can understand just how many people or departments need to be engaged in order to successfully list products online, much less thrive in that space, right? So, we want to see engagement from your sales team. They're the ones who are negotiating contracts, determining distribution with your retail partners. But often the folks on the sales team perhaps lack the knowledge, as you were calling out, to be able to effectively onboard product, because each retailer in Canada has an entirely different platform with different requirements and so forth. So that step in itself can be quite challenging. Then there's the brand teams, right? They should be involved in brand messaging and product positioning to maintain consistency across all platforms. And then writers. How many brands have a team of writers in-house, right? And it's, people sort of overlook this, but it's just so important to craft compelling product descriptions and marketing content suited for the digital shelf specifically. We're not just scraping content from a brand site or from the packaging. And then, of course, being in Canada, we have to translate to French. So you have that requirement as well. You want to engage your French audience, but you also want to make sure that you are in compliance with retailer requirements. You might even need some photographers, right, to take photos of the product so you have really great looking images that drive conversion. You're going to need designers who can actually put together some graphics to engage the consumer and highlight features and benefits. And then syndication specialists. I think you touched on this earlier, David. It can be quite complex. Outside of GS1 feeds in Canada, retailers don't have APIs available for automated syndication just yet. A few of them are working on it, but a lot of this is still very manual. And again, it's always different platform to platform. And then once you push your content onto these sites, you want to make sure that you're able to audit what's there. Did it actually, arrive on the site? And is the information accurate and up to date? I would also suggest that you probably need a program manager who's going to oversee this entire process, right? Because as I called out, there's a number of different steps involved. But I would also strongly, recommend or brands consider engaging agencies like geekspeak to help support them in any one of these steps, because there's just so much involved, and you might not want to or be able to commit to headcount, right, for each of these roles. The other piece here, and I'll pick up pace, I promise, is all about availability and assortment, right? We typically start off with an audit to cross-check what products are actually listed on your retail partner sites versus products that should be listed. If your products aren't available online, they can't contribute to your online sales, right? That's pretty straightforward. And it might sound strange to some people that, why wouldn't your items be on board, right? But it can get a bit challenging just due to the sheer number of items that some brands have, and how complex the onboarding and enrichment process is. So you definitely want to keep track of, which of your items are available on each of your retailer sites. And then there's also that added layer of complexity with distribution, right? Not all your products are available in every single province. It may be a select few, right? The other thing is that these retailer platforms, and for those of you in the audience who have been engaged in this, will probably understand this point. Retailer platforms are constantly being updated. We won't say any names, but things are always shifting or going missing, right, from time to time. And so it's important to get alerts or to find out when those things happen so that you can fix them, right? So really, onboarding products onto these platforms is essential work in order to unlock revenue opportunities and to just maximize your online presence. Okay, the next piece is really the sweet spot, right? The importance of content has been emphasized for years and years. I think we all agree on that. And it's still a fundamental requirement for online success. And for us, we typically start off by conducting really thorough keyword research and reviewing competitor content to identify the most important and relevant search terms, right? And then we work to infuse these keywords into your product title, descriptions, feature benefit bullets to enhance findability and drive organic traffic, right? We also want to optimize that gallery, taking advantage of all the real estate that these retailers make available to us. And the goal here is really to create content that balances the art and science of appealing to both the algorithms as well as the actual humans, the consumers, right?
Sure.
I'm just going to round it out now with retail media networks. In recent years, specifically in Canada, RMNs have become increasingly important with the introduction of platforms like Instacart, Walmart Connect, and Media Aisle by Loblaw. And these networks offer a level playing field, really, if you think about it, for emerging brands, especially that lack that strong relationship with their retail partners, or they lack that shelf space in store. When you're looking at a screen, you really level out the playing field. Smaller brands are able to compete with those larger ones. So RMNs really allow you to go on the offensive as well as defensive, right? So the smaller brands or emerging brands can, push their brand forward, and then those larger brands can also try to protect their market share as well through paid ads.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So much there, right? So much there. You're reminding me, like, it's such a pet peeve, and I'm sure you deal with this when you see products, when brands are taking their we talk about photography and product description images, and they just take a picture of the exact same thing that is on the shelf and just throwing it on the website. That when I see it, I'm like, this is such a huge missed opportunity, because it's a different thing on digital. You have all these other great opportunities to talk about, your key value proposition. You can make it look really digital and cool. You can do more with a picture than you can with a physical product, but they just sort of transpose the image right to, and I'm sure you do a lot of that, where you can say, we could be really optimizing this stuff for conversion, right? That's one of those areas.
Oh, absolutely. All the content we create for ecom is designed with that purpose, right? It's to drive organic traffic, but also to convert once that consumer lands on that PDP. So, I went through a lot there.
Oh, great.
But I think, there's a lot there requiring a lot of human work. But I think it's also important to engage technology here, right? And in our space, we see the use of things like PIMS, product information management tools, or DAMs, digital asset management tools, or digital shelf analytics tools like Upshelf, right? So they're going to allow brands or agencies to achieve some efficiencies here. So can you speak on that a bit?
Yeah, of course. No, of course. Yeah, and that's a great lead in as well. And I think I sent along a few slides that could help me elaborate or sort of help people visualize this. I mean, you mentioned something that was quite interesting about bringing all of those stakeholders together. And that's something that we, folks will say, well, who uses our tools? So we're monitoring, we're data and business intelligence, we're insights, we're actions, alerts. We're kind of the front line, right? We go out there and say, hey, what is the customer seeing? And then we bring that back to brands, but we bring it back not as just data, we bring it back as insights and KPIs and sort of things that you can action and work with, because it's just too much data.
Yes.
So AI plays a big part of it. So who's your main person? And generally, we're also dealing with sales teams, logistics teams, brand specifically, marketing, and even in the compliance area, some legal elements. So we kind of span across it as well. And a big part of that, what you're seeing here on screen, is our dashboard, which tries to bring out so we speak about these four key KPIs around availability, pricing, positioning, and content. So again, beelines directly into what you were talking about with a high level KPI. And then you can kind of start drilling into whatever you need to do that day, right? So to some folks, so the first point about this is personalization. So if you're in that sales team and you're really focused on availability and price, we generally will create a specific, you have a specific dashboard for me, because I don't want to see everything else. I can't really focus on all the other stuff. Just give me the stuff that I need to. So I'm only getting those alerts. I'm only really tracking those things and those KPIs and those products, whereas somebody in brand may be doing something different with positioning or content.
Right.
So when we drive out through, these are kind of high level KPIs. How's my, I've got a baseline or benchmark that I want for availability of my product. And here I could see it at a high level, and I can really identify things very easily. And our dashboard is built in this way that you can drill in at the KPI level, or you can go in through all these different products, and you can create for yourself, what makes more sense to you. So I'm sort of, if I'm a regional manager, I'm focusing on specific set of retailer groups or banners. I can set those up and just have KPIs across those. Or if I have 5 key brands that I'm looking at, or product groups, or whatever we want to call them, parts of a portfolio, or specific product itself that, I can't see all of the screen, but further down the screen, you have your product favorites. Right. So you can kind of jump into your dashboard, and that's where you really start. And that's where you can kind of drive into it. So if we go to the next screen here, I'm going to, an example of a few KPI screens. So this one over here, if you were to click on that availability KPI, just go back for 1 second really quickly. The way that you set a dashboard like ours up is, you see at the top, it says my products, competitor products, points of sale. And this is a sample dashboard for a category. It's like chips and snacks. So it's not any client data. It's just sort of general public data. So you generally look at this from, myopically looking at my own product. So I'm tracking 72 SKUs here, is what 72 means. And I've got 37 competitor products. It's usually a lot higher than that. You're typically tracking around 2 to 3 competitor products per SKU, right? So you want, specifically if it's a product, but it's a specific packaging, it's in 800 milliliters or whatever milligrams it is, you want to have all the products that specifically relate to that product for your main competitors. And then you've got your distribution scope. So I've got 90 stores here, and that could be across, we monitor all the major banners in Canada, specifically for CPG. So all that, Loblaws, the LCL brands, and Sobeys, we've got Amazon Marketplace, Shoppers, IGA, Rexall. We're looking at all the product sets, Costco, and you kind of create your product mix, and that's what we're tracking them against. And you made an interesting point that regionally you may not have distribution in all of these places, but also at a store level, a lot of stores now are considered sort of distribution centers, right? So you have a local area code here. Mine is Mine is over at this Fortino's here at Lawrence and Allen Road. That is where it's being shipped out of. So the availability data that comes from that Fortino's is in fact a reflection of what's on the store shelves, because that's where they're getting the product to send to me. So you actually have this reflection of what's happening at the store level. So yeah, if we can just go forward here, if I were to click on
I just
that.
want to comment that having access to data like this is such a beautiful thing, because it's been such a black box over the years where retailers just don't share a lot of information. And for those that do, often will charge for it, right? So it's just great to have easy access to this kind of data.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that comes down to just time savings. Obviously, visibility is amazing, but we have clients who prior to using our tools had people doing this all day, just logging into screens, right? And then I know that you and your team engage with that activity as well on the content front, right? So it's a lot of it's AI to augment that work you're doing each day, right? It doesn't replace people. It just helps with some of the more remedial tasks in a lot of ways. So this is the availability. If you look here, you have, for all the stores, you see the points of sale on the left. You'll have how much is in stock and how much is out of stock. And you'll even see things that are never listed. And this is an interesting gap that gets uncovered for some brands. That they thought they were part of a planogram, or they should be listed, and they're discovering where they're not even being listed through the platform, which is kind of interesting. And then to the right, you can actually see competitors that do have product in stock. So it gives you that sort of competitive framework. And you can just click on that number where it's out of stock, and it'll show you right there where you're out of stock. We go deeper when you go into the product level. You get these alerts that will alert you based on threshold. So you don't want to know right away if it's out of stock. It may be back in stock in the next half an hour. So you could set it so after 3 days, if it's not in stock for up to 3 days, that there's a challenge. And we also do kind of a delist alert that if it hasn't been in stock for a period, so if it was in stock but no longer in stock for a longer period of time, you may be at risk of being delisted even from the website. You don't even know what's happening, because those e-commerce managers at the retail level are managing their conversion too. And if they see something that's not converting, they're taking stuff off and putting stuff on all the time. Mm-hmm. So it surprises some people to know that at different Metro stores, for example, the distribution isn't all the same. Right? They're actually not even listed in some stores, even at the same banner level.
Yeah.
Right?
There's different contracts. It depends on the province and that sort of thing as well. Yeah, for sure.
Right. And you work through that every day. So if we look at the next screen, this is something that really people love to use. This is basically using computer vision to monitor and compare the image that's been uploaded to our site. So essentially, when we onboard a client, we're uploading all you call it the golden record, right? The single source of truth. So we got the product titles, descriptions, bullet points, images. And then what we do is we go and we compare that using AI basically to what's showing on all these sites. So here you're looking at individual products and locations, and you're seeing if it's matching or not. And we actually give you these alerts that say, there's something wrong with this product. And some of them may be okay. It may just be a screen resolution issue, but you can see right off the bat here that there's certain products that just aren't representative. So we score it. We have a scoring based on sort of pixel to pixel comparison of the image, and you can get these alerts, and then you can go take action. And in some cases, it may be okay. And you can just sort of accept it, so you're not getting the same alert over and over again. Right? With those chocolate sticks, it may be good enough, right? We don't want you to go through that process. So, but generally, this is one of these great tools that people love.
Yeah, I told you this is my favorite feature.
I know.
Because we create so much content, right? And we want to make sure that what we create is actually live on these sites. And so, as far as I know, yours is the only tool that actually uploads that source of truth and does that side-by-side comparison. And that's an incredible thing, because it's based on actual versus, rules. Right.
And you were mentioning that some folks don't have, they don't have a PIM, they don't have that DAM or PIM strategy in place, and you can theoretically use this as a quasi kind of product, library,
holding place, yeah,
kind of a holding place, and it doesn't do what PIM does. Like, we know what those platforms do, but it could help you from that perspective.
For sure.
Just going along here, I don't want to take too long on these slides, but the next slide, I believe, yeah. So again, this is a view now, and if you were to zoom in on one specific product, I think this is like some chips. This is the view of the product itself, and you have those 4 tabs. So now I'm talking at the product level: availability, pricing, positioning, and content at that product level. And this is where these alerts start to come into play. So you'll see here that, now we're looking at positioning. So this is rank for category and what frequency we have on the top shelf and on page 1. So top shelf speaks to the first 8 listings. It's a top shelf, and then page 1 is called the first 50 listings. And we're tracking keywords and competitors and frequency that you're getting on those searches. So for, here you see a few keywords for the word potato chips. You see that this brand is at, top shelf frequency at 17% across all the stores, and they're 92% of the time on the first store. And you'll see in different languages, right? Crousti is chips in French. And then you can see this on a timeline basis. So say you're doing work at your end, Trish, you were mentioning updating all those product titles. You're doing work, right? So you're doing all this work to optimize this. You'll see differences in that trend as your work continues on. So you can see the value of that work over time. And you can also compare that to your competitors, sorry. So this alert that you see at the top, that competitor has 68 more top shelf positions, that's the kind of alert that you get from our platform. You'll get those via email or however you want to receive them. And that's really key. If you were to click on that, you would see all of those competitors just listed right there, or all those locations.
Yeah, that's definitely worthy of a red exclamation mark there.
100%. 100%. On the next slide, we also engage, and so you saw some KPIs, you saw some dashboard screens. There's also a series of reports, and you can generate different reports. This is a share of voice report that looks at, and again, this is in a different market, but you get the idea here. For keyword level share of page 1 for different keywords, and basically you have your goals, and you kind of look at your core competitor, and you want to make sure you're sort of outperforming your core competitor, and that's for all instances of those of your brand showing up on those pages. And then you see this here on a actual retailer level. So you can kind of get a sense of your share of voice for, total share of voice, or just for organic, or even just look at where a sort of snapshot on the sponsored side. So it does an average of the kind of ad activities. You mentioned retail media networks. Who's buying a lot, or am I losing share of voice here for a specific product in certain keywords? Because that's where a lot of that purchase activity is going on those retail media networks. It's a lot of keyword search.
For sure.
Keyword bidding, right? Similar to click. And I'll try and wrap here. What else do we have? So you mentioned obviously price. Price is an interesting element. If you think about doing price analysis or understanding pricing in a scenario with price, we're doing MAP compliance. So here you're talking about advertised price. We're trying to understand when you're dropping below that MAP. That can have some profit compression when it comes to sort of chewing up with your retail partners. You also have the idea of being competitive with them and understanding who may be outpricing you, or more importantly, there may actually be some profit opportunities to raise pricing. If you're looking at it on an annual basis or quarterly basis, you could be sort of tracking this over time and saying, hey, I think we're maybe leaving money on the table here, right? So there's some competitive elements here. And rather than waiting for your Nielsen report, on a monthly or quarterly basis, which we know is quite expensive and it doesn't come at the right time, you can get these kind of insights relatively quick. So here we're seeing price compliance, what's happening with your competitors and their products and their pricing. You get these alerts like that red alert about where, all the points of sale where you're being priced out below your MAP. And you're even getting information about promotional pricing. So where you're on promotion and even where your competitors are promoting you or out promoting you. So that's sort of interesting from a price perspective. And I think that's it, right? I'm not sure. Do I have another screen? Yeah, I think that's it for screens. Awesome. Yeah, a lot there, right?
For sure. And I think you kind of opened up a few different modules that are of interest to different stakeholders. in
Right.
any organization. So
That's the point, right?
yeah, it's not just your ecom team. It's definitely, your sales team, the finance team, your brand teams as well. So I think that there's quite a bit of data there within Upshelf for the different stakeholder groups for sure.
100%. So, I mean, how do people get started? I guess is a big question, right? It's like, where do you go? Where do you start? I mean, how do you approach, that sort of always that good, better, good, better, best kind of equation?
Yeah, that's a good call out, and I think for folks who are pretty immersed in ecom, they'll be able to understand pretty much everything that we just went through. But if you're fairly new to it, it can be a lot. It can be quite overwhelming for sure. Um, what we like to say at Geekspeak is that we'll meet you where you are, and we know that everybody's at a different stage in their journey, right? And CPG in particular, we know we see a lot of disparities. There are some brands that engaged in e-commerce and embraced it really early on. They've structured their teams to truly support an omni-channel strategy. And in these organizations, you have one team aligned and working towards unified goals. In other cases, we've seen brands develop what they call a center of excellence, where you've got a specialized team dedicated to business growth in ecom, right?
Right.
But surprisingly, and perhaps more commonly, we see brands playing a bit of catch up, right? And we said earlier on, grocery in particular, CPG in particular, has been a little slow to adapt to ecom. And so a lot of these larger brands have limited resources. And so what we say, though, it doesn't matter where you are, we'll help you out. We'll jump in, right? But if we had a choice and we could start from the beginning, we'd probably want to start at discovery, like it says right here on the screen, right? And in this phase, we do a lot of listening, right? We try to understand the brand or brands, categories, challenges, of course, the competitive landscape, who are your main competitors, and of course, try to understand what their goals are as well. Next, I would say would be market analysis. And so this is where we take a deep dive into understanding category or categories and the details around each brand within a portfolio, right? What are the differentiating attributes from one product to the next and so forth? How do they stack up against their competitors? And really identifying the opportunities there. Then what we do is we take all those learnings from our discovery sessions, as well as our own market research, and coupled with our knowledge of ecom and best practices that we've sort of honed over the years. And we develop a roadmap. And this roadmap would include budgets as well as timelines. And then once that roadmap is approved, we get to the execution, right? We start actually delivering on all those assets and materials that we talked about earlier. And then following that, sort of circling back to some of the content that you went through, is the monitoring and refinement, right? Things are not static. Things change quite often. Things shift. New technology opens up. And so there is that requirement to constantly monitor and refine things as you go. You can't set it or forget it in ecom, right? And ultimately, what we work towards is that category leadership, right? So if you do all of these things, ultimately, you'll start to see that you're going to become a bit of a leader in that category. And David, I think, this circular area here between monitoring and refinement is where, Upshelf really lives a lot. Can you touch on that and, explain a little bit more about where Upshelf fits in that space?
100%. Well, I love your slide there. If you want to leave it up, I think it's fantastic. I mean, I always wonder, market analysis, just before I jump in, and it really is truly a virtuous process, right? A continuous improvement process when you talk about monitoring. And I mentioned before, we're kind of like the infantry or the special ops in we're out there in the front looking at stuff and opportunities, and we bring it back, and then you kind of go and continue to optimize. But the market analysis and roadmap development is what really intrigues me. I always love to understand how, you connect the business value and know where to start, and then continually grow that way. Because generally in technology, there's always an idea, and people get really excited about it, and they get it going, and they don't see stuff sort of fast enough, right? And they start saying, maybe we'll just close that off, or we'll push. It could easily get, if you don't have a really strong objective, like and that vision, people sort of driving things through. You were saying it before, that champion, I think, is so important for us,
100%,
because it's easy to shut stuff off. It's like when companies start losing, they'll say when you start losing, or if you have a downturn, that's when you should double down on those investments. But people tend to shut them down, right? And that's so important. I love this. I love this approach. I love where you go with this here.
I love that point that you brought up, though. I mean, you can get all the licenses you want to these tools, but you still need humans to understand what the tool is actually out there, what data it's gathering, and how to interpret it, and then how to respond to it, right?
Yeah.
And understand where it all fits in with your overall strategy. And I think that's often a mistake some brands make, is that perhaps they underestimate the amount of time required to really immerse themselves in understanding these tools and how it can help them. And so that's where a little bit of friction can come into play, right? And so you do need that champion to help them interpret the data, so that they can actually make decisions going forward, right?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah, and so I'll speak to my kind of analogy as well.
For
But
sure.
I did have an experience. I used to run an enterprise consulting shop. We used to do technology consulting projects, big content management systems, e-commerce systems. And I remember at the time, the statistic was somewhere around 92% of the projects that we built, and you would spend thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars on a project, never saw the light of day, right? Which is so frustrating when you think about it. I think now with e-commerce, specifically in CPG, it was one of those things that you kind of could sit out if it was 1% of your sales or 2% of your sales. But when you're talking about some of the numbers you mentioned and what we know as being, trending towards 10, 12, 13% of overall revenue coming from e-commerce, it's not something you can sit out any longer, right? So you need to have that whole strategy in place, and you need to continue investing. So I guess I sent you a slide around this concept that I have, and the analogy that I use, or the metaphor I use, is a marathon versus a race. You're investing in a 1, 2, 5 year kind of program of sort of domination, right? You were talking about category domination or category leadership. So this concept that I have is around a marathon, and when you think about a marathon, and if you haven't run one before, or you're a runner, your first thing you're working on is conditioning, right? Your conditioning really speaks to doing your sort of trials and getting your heart rate sort of working, your diet, your hydration, your legs, sort of your strength, right? So you can just condition yourself to handle something of that duration, because it is quite long. 26 miles or 50 kilometers, whatever it is. And then we move into the second stage when you're training. And I've had to speak to friends of mine who do this. You're talking about ranking, because you start doing your first marathon and you do finish it. So you're conditioned, but you're finishing it and you're kind of 30 minutes behind the leadership group, right? So you finished it, but you're not really ranking, right? So
you're just happy you made it to the end.
You're very happy. You got the picture, you got the selfie. But you want to rank. So you want to be in that first 15, 20, 30 people. You want to be in that pile of people on a regular basis, right? So you want to be ranking all the time. And then, of course, you want to win some races. Right? You actually want to come in for a third, for a second. You want to be up there. So that's the analogy. So when I speak about conditioning, call it getting your house in order, the general place we start is in monitoring basics. So, data, price, availability, and content. You mentioned that. So I get and of course, associated with that is developing that SKU and point of sale or location mix. So we're, for example, we have our core SKUs, core competitors, and we know what we upload all of our data, our pricing, our MAP, we have all that data in place. And then we kind of develop a good sampling across the country of those locations. So we have our core so it's for Loblaws and, wherever, in the west part of the country, it could be, some of the Pattison group stores, and you're, east side of the country, you have certain groups. In Quebec, you have whatever that group may be, maybe Metro or whoever it may be. And then you got your Ontario groups, and you sort of have those elements, a good selection of locations, and you kind of turn it on.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts to sort of give you that monitoring. You build your KPIs, so you have that sort of baseline that you're looking for. And then associated with that is creating some kind of scorecard or reporting framework so that people can see what you're doing. So it starts to become this sort of getting your house in order concept. I call it conditioning. You have KPIs. You have maybe 2 or 3 people who are using the dashboards. You're not really spreading too far yet. You're kind of keeping it close. And then from there, you're kind of generating these reports that people could say, oh, look at what's happening across the organization. Here's how we're performing. And the value you're driving from that towards the bottom, is really in time savings at first. So you're really saving a half FTE or an FTE of sort of just someone who's looking at stuff all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also this notion of revenue preservation. You have an idea of what's happening. You're preserving revenue. We talked about brand loyalty, and we don't want to slip in our main things or the things that we're looking at. So those are kind of elements that are key from a value perspective. And just having a unified view of this, having one place to sort of find this information is really key in that stage. And then we sort of we have interesting discussion as we go into making the program a bit more sophisticated in ranking. We talk about ranking. We talk about really looking more at competitive analysis. So you really start to understand the competitive landscape. And we're diving deeper into things like search and keywords. So generally, people will always say, let's get availability and price up and running. They always want that. And they want to make sure their content's in place. We talked about in conditioning. Now we're talking about keyword competition. We want to understand search. We want to really start looking at our competitors. And we're starting, the third point there I'm making is you're starting to leverage more people inside the organization, because you have this great organization. You have so much human resource capital, ideas, insights, work being done. So now how can we take these insights and start spreading that out to more people? And one thing that we offer, it's really important, is we offer unlimited support calls, and we offer unlimited users, because that's key to getting people engaged, because that way you have more and more people. You're sort of leveraging this data for more power inside the organization. And we find that when we speak with our team, with people inside the organizations, we get more and more insights on how we can help them. But really getting more dashboards, more people involved. So you were just looking at it as an e-commerce manager. Now I've got, one person on the sales team engaged in Ontario, right? And I've got the brand manager working on it, and somebody who's looking at sort of stock or logistics or in the trade group, whatever it may be. So that's what happens when you're starting to rank, and now you're looking at you're looking at sort of rank growth, you're looking at insights, alerts, new dashboards, and now we're starting to have some revenue growth. That's sort of the value. You could be looking at growing certain categories, and you're certainly looking from a value perspective at speed to market. So we mentioned, who do we compete with? A lot of it is like a Nielsen report, and that's a report that happens, a month later. You're getting it once or 4 times a year. You're waiting a long time for it, and we're providing sort of real-time stuff. So if you want to understand something, you're getting a stock alert, or you want to change some pricing. It's hard to change pricing on a monthly basis, but when you're talking about changing or affecting stock, you can do that quickly, or you can really have a real impact on what the product looks like and your keywords within a day, right? You're looking at this information. You do this all the time. It's the wrong image. This title is wrong. I'm going to update that right now. I'm going to have that ready, and using the syndication team or process you built, I'll have it live within a day, right? That doesn't happen typically, right? So speed to market and having more revenue growth associated with that, whether that's conversion or whatever it may be, that's in that ranking. And then we're going into winning, right? So now we're talking about price and profit analysis, so we can start driving some higher profitability or try to win certain categories. We're talking about ad spending insights. So, a lot of these ad platforms or retail media networks are disconnected from stock and availability at these locations. So, in some scenarios, you may actually be promoting a product that you don't even have stock of,
Hmm.
That's just a defensive mechanism. How about the idea of building ads when you know your competitor doesn't have stock, right? That's a great opportunity, right? Well, if you're on promotion on a product and they aren't, that's a great time for you to be driving those ads, and you're going to get higher conversion, right? So you're talking about winning. It's the concepts around winning, whether that's in a better ROAS, return on ad spend, or whatever it may be. So when you're starting to win now we're looking at broader content analysis. You do these big processes to sort of start driving better organic rank. We're looking at price and profit analysis, ad spending insights, and now we're starting to add more regions or SKUs. We're starting to look at different product lines. We're seeing in the dark kind of thing, right? And starting to drive it further. And then, of course, from an operational efficiencies perspective, we start to see more integration topics, right? You don't start integrating data until you know it's really working. So you're not going to build, into your BI framework until it's all working right, or start building some integrations to your task management systems or CRM. But at that point, we have data available via webhooks or through RSS feeds. You can kind of grab that data and throw it somewhere else.
Right.
That's when you're getting that cool stuff. So now you talk about category growth and incremental revenue growth and so on.
I love this slide because I think it really aligns well with our approach as well.
Yeah.
The crawl, walk, run approach. You start off with those basics, get those nailed, and then you work on enhancing your content or your listings even more, and then you look at acceleration through advertising and other media types. So I think this aligns really well, and it's a great way to summarize things. My last question about this slide, though, is has this analogy inspired you to start training for a marathon, or?
No, I only run when people are chasing me.
Oh, okay.
Like I'm more of a bicycler. Unless I'm being chased, I'm not running too much.
Very cool. I had to ask. All right. We've gone through a lot today. That was a lot of information.
Yeah, sorry.
And we could go on for hours because there's just so much in this space. That said, I'm going to check to see if we have any questions. And David, it looks like we do.
Yeah, it looks like it.
So first off, what is the best practice for updating content when retailer standards change? Do these changes typically apply to new products only, or do all products need to have their content updated when this happens? Good question.
That's a good one for you.
Yeah, for sure. Here's the fun part is oftentimes retailers don't tell you when their standards have changed. You kind of find out on the fly, either when they're running a report or you get a scorecard. Walmart has been issuing scorecards to their suppliers for a few years now. And so when they change their standards, they will update the criteria in those scorecards. And so you might see your score drop whenever your listings are no longer in meet the standards. So you'll get notified that way, and that will sort of trigger you to go take a look at the new updated guide. So that's one way. In other ways we've seen is that, somebody from Walmart or other retailers may reach out to their contacts on record and just inform brands of these changes. And then that's how you sort of fall into line as far as compliance is concerned. LCL has recently launched a scorecard of their own. So they are probably just a few months in as far as wide release is concerned. But what that indicates to me is just how important content is for these retailers. And they're keeping tabs on it and letting you know where you sit on their sites, right? And they're looking for action when they flag these things. And just to answer the last part of that question, do you have to update all of your SKUs? Yes. So all of your SKUs would be included in those scorecards. So you would have to update your older SKUs as well. It's not just for your innovation. So you want to make sure that you bring all of your listings up to standard.
Yeah, it makes sense. And we were collaborating a bit on that on a report. We do have scorecards based on the audit rules. And you set a baseline, right? You're setting a baseline. You're monitoring that on a regular basis or a monthly basis. So when you're falling below it, that's when you know you need to at least make some changes, right? That's you set that KPI on a pretty regular basis across multiple auditing rules, not just one, right? Like it could be just one element that has a problem. You may not make a big change there, but if you're falling below a series of them on an aggregated basis, you need to make a broader change potentially.
Absolutely. And the way that we view it is that those retailer scorecards are the minimum requirements.
Right.
We like to go above and beyond that so that we're ahead of the curve, so to speak. And so often we're actually submitting content, above those minimum requirements.
Yeah.
So we've got one more question here.
I'll take this.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it says, in your experience, how does product content affect omnichannel? So maybe I'll take a start on this one. Maybe
Go for it.
I mean, I think omnichannel. I mean, and again, we're talking about all channels. I think product content, and I'm sort of mentioning it before. You have product that sits on a shelf, and then you have an image that may be different on that digital channel. Now, on the digital channel, we know that product content will have an impact on conversion, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have a shaded, grainy image and you're being compared to somebody else who has a nice clear image, that actually has an impact on people's perception of your product, right? It's an old image. If it doesn't have, if it's not what they expect in some way, right? If it's doesn't have the sort of core value, whatever elements, then it has an impact. But what I've seen really have impact is when people are using, great marketing tactics on those product images. So why not use some of your client claims, right? Like voted, you can have a product that looks like a milk box on the shelf, but when you bring it on your graphic, it could have more on it. You can have a few bullet points of health values that are bigger. If you know your clients, these 3 things are most important to your clients, to your consumer, you can actually put those in the graphic in a different way than you could do it on a physical product. And that could drive higher conversion, which obviously drives a better experience for a user and more sales. But what do you think?
Yeah, 100%. I think, continuity is so important.
True.
Your online experience should be just as good as your in-store experience. And historically, what we've seen is that brands will spend a lot, on their packaging, on their, mass media, social media, all that good stuff. And then when it comes to that moment of truth, when you have a consumer ready to add to cart, that PDP just does not match
Right.
what's going on in social media or on television commercials. So as we called out before, that omni-channel consumer is everywhere. They're in store, they're online, they're on your sites, they're on platforms like Instacart, they're on social media. And so it's just so important to have continuity in terms of your brand messaging, in terms of your quality, as you called out. It just really impacts your overall perception. So I think product content is just incredibly important. It should be consistent across all channels.
Yeah, so just remember they did that search session a few months ago, and the insight that I'd found was that younger shoppers tend to do Google searches inside the store. Like, it's everywhere that your product is showing, right? And so one thing we track is also Google Shop, which is a great way to identify new retailers, by the way, and you see where your product is everywhere. Mm-hmm. And so someone could be sitting in the store, but they're saying, well, they want to know compared to this other product, like what are some of the ratings and reviews on it, or they want to know where. What the nutritional value of this really is, or is this real? Is this for real? Or they're looking at that right inside the store. So that goes beyond just like you got the store, you've got your e-commerce experience at that, but you also have Google and you also have social, right? Like you have all these channels that are really tough to deal with.
Well, I'll tell you what's wild. Like we've been in this space for a very long time, and in the early days, we used to talk about, trying to replicate the consumer experience in store online. But I think the online experience has far surpassed what's going on in store because, when you're in store, you literally only have the product packaging, right?
Right.
And so you don't have the ability, like you just called out, to look at ratings and reviews or to even watch a video to see how the product works, or to really dig into those specific features and benefits of the product. So it's just interesting how things have changed.
100%.
Yeah. So you know, David, I think this might be our record. We've went on for quite a while here, but
Oh,
it was all good stuff. I really appreciate you joining us here on Point of Purchase.
thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet.
Great.
So if our viewers want to learn more about Upshelf, get in touch with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, well, LinkedIn, we have our page on LinkedIn, and or www.upshelf.ai. You can request a demo there. It's a really easy form. We actually offer free trials for your own product and category, which is really valuable. So you can start tracking and seeing a few of your own products and competitors. You can DM me directly or connect with me directly on LinkedIn. Or I'm not going to go into the spelling of my first and last name. Just go to the website.
We've got it on screen.
Go to the website or go to screen. Exactly. david.benoliel@upshelf.ai.
Amazing. Thanks
Thank you.
again. And listen, if anyone out there needs help navigating the world of ecom, wherever you are in your journey, please check out geekspeakcommerce.com or reach out to me via LinkedIn or email. Thanks so much for joining, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Fish. You're the best. Thank you.
All right. Take it easy.